Greetings, it's nice to be with you all today. My case study is about Insure-Tech in a small company of about 300 people employing Scrum. Imagine you parachute into a company after a phone call, and what you get is a place that has no experience, very few resources, unlimited impediments, and a minimal and sort of next to nothing training and coaching budget. We went in there and brought them Scrum, and we got some good results. The situation with the company is that it basically is a 30-year-old company that used to be the leader in an innovative new thing. They kind of defined the thing, and that now there's a million small startups that are out to eat their lunch and are actually doing that quite successfully. They're owned by a private equity firm. They purchased a company in another city that's about a third the size of them to bring some new blood into the company, and they're looking to realize value. So one of the main takeaways from this case study is that if you are doing 3 or 4 teams in Scrum, you are actually doing ScrumatScale. So, the context, like I said, private equity, recently acquired, so forth. Here's the picture. The strategy is we're going to introduce Scrum to the product owners, to the teams, and to the Scrum Masters, and we're going to implement a Meta-Scrum and a Scrum of Scrums. Now, the teams had no training at all, so I actually went around and I read the Scrum guide to them, and I took their questions from the point of view of a team. The only people who had any training was 1 day of Scrum Master training, 1 day of product owner training. That's all they had, and then I went around and did fireside chats with the teams and got them up to speed on Scrum. This slide here shows the incremental results we made. Basically, we had 4 measures. 3 of them were 1 to 10 measures with the sales and marketing team, the external customers, and the dev teams. And then we used a metric called defect density, which is a number of defects per 1,000 lines within the reporting period. And you can see the incremental results we got from that. Like I said, the approach was to socialize the Scrum guide and do my best to get a Meta-Scrum and Scrum of Scrums going. That actually worked extremely well. One of the things about Scrum at Scale is that you need to get the Scrum of Scrums and the Meta-Scrums going right away. The EAT might take you a little bit longer, but you can implement the Meta-Scrum and the Scrum of Scrums right away. People will jump at the chance to collaborate and do a good job together. People want to do great work. They don't need any more authorization to do that, and you can implement that right now. So that's a big takeaway. One of the things that didn't work, we had very little executive engagement. The saying was, well, Scrum's great for the engineering teams, but it has nothing to do with the business. They're in the software business, and this is actually the thing that was going on. So there was no opportunity to implement an EAT, and there was going to be a highly probable conflict of framework versus framework with the newly acquired company in the headquarters, right? So here's some familiar patterns with the impediments. We've all seen these patterns before. The disengaged top-level exec, a lot of technical debt, and of course, issues with contention for decision-making authority, which is usually at the root of every impediment you've ever seen in Scrum. Like I said, that's what we achieved. And what are the top takeaways? Number 1, you do not necessarily need to start with an EAT to be successful. Number 2, you must implement Scrum of Scrums and Meta-Scrum if you have any chance of success at all. Number 3, you must identify and mentor a champion. It's a good idea to give them something to read or something to do, invite them to do that, and then see how they respond. If they respond in a dead, lifeless way, move on and find someone else. If they come back and they say, hey, I read those 15 pages, in fact, I read 25 more, and the book is awesome, you have a live one there, just keep mentoring that person. You must socialize the Scrum guide as the definition of Scrum. If you fail to do this, in my opinion, you will fail. Period. So get the Scrum guide out, read it, have them read it, translate it for them, interpret it for them. And lastly, word definitions, like what is Scrum? That's actually an agreement. So word definitions are actually, shared definitions are actually agreements. You need agreements to actually get good Scrum to happen. And the last and most important insight, which I said at the beginning of this talk, is that if you're doing 3 or 4 teams in Scrum, you're actually taking a shot at Scrum at Scale. You might not be aware of that, but worldwide, everyone's taking a shot at Scrum at Scale if they have more than 4 teams. So there you go, and I'm happy to take your questions. Anybody have a question for me?
Thanks, Daniel. It was incredible. How did you deal with it's not working as you want, maybe?
Well, it wasn't just the EAT, it was also this, I had a situation with the stakeholders. If you read the slides, you saw that they were moving from a service focus to a product focus. You know, the OODA loop, observe, orient, act, decide. I thought it might be smart to ask for authorization to socialize the Scrum Guide with the stakeholders. When I actually asked for permission, I was given the answer no. And the reason why was because they were going through a transition in decision rights. And they didn't need any more stress than they already had. So I was very glad that I asked that question. I also darkened the door of the CEO who, you know, domiciled in another city and was leading here. And I never did get a meeting with that person. So we did the best we could. We worked at the mid-level. Everyone was very happy with Scrum, and you know, things went well. Going forward, they are going to hit a ceiling. There's no two ways around that. Is there another question?
Yeah, it was a great presentation. Hi. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm curious, it was a short engagement for you, and you did a lot of damage in a very short period of time. What would you want to do next? What would you leave undone that you'd want to do?
Yeah, well, immediately establish a need. Yeah, and also, I can tell you a story where I had a dual presentation at the front of the room, in front of the whole company with one of the executives. And like I do, I put a couple of visual artifacts on the wall. They had some verbatim quotes from the Scrum Guide about how things work. And I asked them, you know, for authorization to put these things on the wall behind us. And there were a couple of verbatim quotes. One was, for the product owner to be successful, everyone in the organization must respect his or her decisions. And he looked at me and he said, is that verbatim from the Scrum Guide? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I don't really want to really do it that way. In the other city, so I'd rather we don't have that poster on the wall. I was very glad I asked them. So they obviously have some challenges before them. You know, since then I've gone back and I've done a little follow-up and a little aftercare with them, but only at the level that I entered. No, I never got any higher access in that company, and I didn't push it because pushing Scrum doesn't actually work. So, any other questions I may answer? Thank you kindly.